Hello, my name is Christian Montel and I'm talking about artificial intelligence in HR applications. Please keep in mind that when you're implementing HI tools for HR tasks, it implies getting down to fundamental political questions. And whenever it's coming down to brass tacks, it's very challenging, especially in everyday corporate life, to share opinions, personal opinions publicly about very emotional things, like, for example, how is wealth and how is power distributed within a system? Who has access to resources and who pays for flaws of the system, actually? And please keep in mind, and that's one of the reasons why I started this live stream, that whenever it comes down to this discomfort, the discomfort is not on you, but it's on the hardness of the problem. It's not your fault that it feels strange in a very strange way when you actually address all the elephants in the room. To inspire discussions about these brass tack issues, it might help to learn how other disciplines address similar problems when it comes to their particular field. And that's the reason why I'm very excited to address today's very special guest, Paola Sturla. I had the honor to do an interview with her, and you will be benefiting from the results of this interview in a very few moments. Whenever you have questions, comments, concerns, or feedback coming up, please address them to livestream@eligo.de. And please think about signing up at www.eligo.de/livestream to allow us to keep you updated. So have fun with the interview with Paola. So thank you so much for joining me, Paola. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Christian, for having me on the podcast. I'm very happy for this opportunity.
Okay, that's very good. And we're very happy to have you. But as many of our viewers might not be aware, where's the connection between architecture, human resource, and artificial intelligence? And they don't know you either so far. And I would love you to introduce yourself to our viewers so that we can change all that.
Okay, so first of all, hello, everyone. I am an architect, a landscape designer, and I'm currently completing my PhD in urban planning, design, and policy with a thesis that focuses on the application of artificial intelligence in creative practices, for instance, the one of landscape design. But I believe that the results of my work can be expanded toward other similar disciplines. In my career, I had several experiences, both in academia and in practice. Especially, I've been working on very big infrastructure projects, mega projects, I will say. And after that, I decided to move back to academia and to start my PhD. So what is, let's say, peculiar of my experience is that I share I've been in both the realms. So that's what it's my major highlight, let's say.
Okay, can you elaborate? Both means exactly what? What are the opposing realms?
Oh, yes. So one is the one of academia. I'm sure all your audience know about that. So getting a PhD, teaching in university, and, growing as a professor and as a researcher. So somehow putting some new ideas in the world. The other one is the one of professional practice, which in my field means to put new buildings, new infrastructure into the world. So somehow we are always making something new, but of a very different kind. And regarding my professional experience, I have been practicing for an Italian engineering company whose work focuses mainly on transportation infrastructure. So I was involved in these kind of big projects in huge interdisciplinary teams with people from all around the world. So I believe that was quite an interesting experience with its, let's say, counterpart being an academic at top institutions. I was at Harvard for a few years. And so I will say that I can somehow speak about the creative fields from both these points of view.
Wow, this is absolutely fascinating. You were mentioning ideas to come up when it comes to artificial intelligence and human resource management in particular, because so far it seems like your background has an emphasis on architecture, but not so much on the non-architectural, but say cultural part and so on. And I would love you to elaborate a bit on that, because I think that's the part why my former colleague Klaus recommended you, actually, because he told me, yeah, you've got to talk to this lady because she knows her stuff and she has a very interesting view on that. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I understand that from outside, architecture might look like the business of making objects into the city, making landscapes like parks or gardens into the city, or infrastructure like railways, airports, whatever. However,
that's the layman's view on it.
Yeah,
I have to
exactly.
admit,
That's what I
same for me.
understand people get from outside. However, in order to do so, we need to address a lot of cultural biases. Literally, we are working every time in a different cultural context. And therefore, we need to be very aware of our, let's say, how to say, biases, preconcepts, in order to understand what our client is asking us and delivering something that can fit into that specific environment, cultural environment. So
that rings some bells, actually, because I know I know similar things from the HR work, and you could have told the exact same thing about a typical complex HR project. So that's very interesting. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and especially these days in our globalized world, it's more and more common, and it has been the current practice for the past 20 to 30 years, I will say, for architects to practice outside of their context of origin, let's say. So I was born and raised in Italy, in Milan, and I ended up working on projects in the Middle East, all around Europe, teaching in the United States. So you see, like, the cultural clashes are there every day for us to be sorted through. And we have to make on a daily basis complex decisions based like around these kind of cultural issues. And with culture, I mean it in a very, very extended way, including the economics of the projects, the economic context. So, for instance, if there is a crisis going on, or some, you know, like these days after the pandemic, we are all experiencing some issues. So our market is very sensible to that. And the environmental context, which is also very important, and it has been for us for at least the second half of the 20th century, because in our profession, we put physical objects in the world. And that's why we are very aware of the impact that could have on an environmental, under an environmental point of view, let's say.
And
so
that's a bit different. That seems to be a bit different for the HR work, because we don't have like an object you can kind of take in your hands and stuff, but it's another, say, it's an as obvious part of reality you're about to create. I like this say the parallel between those two approaches. And what I was wondering is, what can we learn from architecture when it comes to the awareness of these impacts? Because to me, it seems to be a very, very hard thing to make people aware of what they're actually doing when, for example, they are laying out stairs in a certain way or something.
Yeah, I think that in our field, it's very easy to see the effects, you know, because you see the manufact. And so it's very hard not to acknowledge and not to take into account what are the, let's say, also the externalities of what we do. But I believe that every professional in every field somehow deals with impacts and externalities. the difference is that they might be less visible. So I would say that the narrating my profession, the one of designing objects for the physical world, could be of help for people who work in fields in which their outcomes are less physical and more like, if I think about HRs, like I can imagine them structuring a team, for example, a team of people. And this is a result. That will have an impact on the project, will have an impact on the company. And therefore, to learn from people that train themselves to test the outcomes of their ideas and review their projects in order to make them better on a continuous basis could be of help.
That's very interesting and very fascinating. Could you highlight some examples, the more specific, the better, where the artificial intelligence approach from the architectural or design point of view and the HR view overlap and where they differ, just to make it easier for our audience to understand what's the beauty of your approach to kind of pair the two viewpoints?
Yeah, so let's start by saying that artificial intelligence is a statistical method, a statistical tool that is used to automate part of human activities. So these can apply to whatever field. So in that regard, we know that artificial intelligence has been attempted in the design world, in the realm of urban design, for example, so to design the massing of new neighborhoods in cities, and in order to shape the buildings, like get a computer to propose potential shapes for objects, buildings, whatever.
Okay.
And I know that similar applications are in use in the HR world, for example, for the initial screenings of applicants.
Oh,
after, a round of job applications in LinkedIn, for example. So as I said, this is a way to somehow automate complex human tasks. So I will say that there is something in common here, which is the attempt to support the human professional to make a decision.
Okay.
So AI reveals patterns. So in the case of designing a plaza, you can feed the algorithm with 10,000 designs of already existing plazas and see what comes out. The same with HR, you can train the algorithm on the CVs of successful candidates in the past, for example. Or you can set up in a supervised machine learning field, you can set up what are the thresholds that you want your algorithm to recognize and somehow to group CVs in order to, to screen which ones are potentially good candidates and which ones are not, to then leave to the human professional to review only the, 20 that are potential candidates.
Okay.
So this is what is in theory, let's say. And in theory, there is a lot of hype around that and people love this idea. And I can see why, I can tell you like how time consuming is in our field to just come out with the correct sketch for the massing of a new building. It can take forever. You can test a lot of different options, and then there is always that moment in which you have to make a decision, and that decision implies some accountability. So I can see how people are excited at the idea of delegating that decision to a machine. However,
that's something which it doesn't keep me from saying this, because I was wondering, is it really about taking the decision itself? Because it means like when you have two options which are about the same, say, value or outcome, or some have drawbacks, some have advantages and stuff, then the hard part is to decide between these options. And I was actually wondering, not to be mean, but I was actually wondering, is it really about taking the decision, or is it kind of evaluating the possible outcomes of several decisions in a say comparative way?
Well, that depends, I guess, on the AI you're using. Some of them might, you know, in our field, some of them might output some proposals. Some others can test different proposals around to a context. That really depends on the software and if in which phase of the project you are in. For example, if you are in a planning phase, so a very initial phase, you might want to test different options to see what could be the the impact on the city. On the other hand, if you are already in a more detailed phase, so when the biggest decision at big scale have been taken already, you might want to see potential variations of the shape within a realm that has been previously defined by a previous round of decision making.
Wow.
So
okay.
somehow I believe the idea is that these techniques can be used in both the situations. It really depends on what's your task and what you need it for. And in that regard, it would be very interesting to set up a collaboration with a computer scientist to program the actual AI that can do the job, or at least try to do the job. Because it's it really requires some specificity. And here I want to I want to reconnect to that theme of the cultural biases we have been addressing in the previous, in my previous answer. So the thing is that we, like in our field, is very, very evident when you have, let's make an example, a very practical one, so people can understand. Imagine you're designing a piazza, and different cultures interpret the public life in a very different ways. So you can easily imagine how a Spanish person or an Italian person can really love to be out there interacting with people, etc. While people from other cultures, like, I don't know, like from more colder countries, for example, might have a less attitude for that. And therefore leave the public space in a completely different way. That leads, and together with the climate in which you are, which brings different material decisions. So depending on what you are, where you are, you have different local resources, etc. So that leads to different designs.
Okay.
If you train an algorithm with examples that come from warm southern countries to design a piazza in a northern cold country, you might have
I can imagine, yeah,
it might not work. And I believe something very similar might happen in the HR world when you have some approaches that are cultural based, like people can behave in an interview in a different way, or somehow frame their CV in a different way. Even starting from the graphic layout, some people might be more synthetic, just highlighting few key facts. Others can be more, like write down of 3, 4, 5 pages of details about what they've been doing. And some people might interpret the career as a very structured and linear thing, like you start doing something, you end doing something. And some others might be looking around and trying different options before entering a straight path. That is also cultural. There are some cultures that accept that more than others. So somehow the moment in which you train an algorithm to make the initial screening, for example, and you use a training data sets of CVs that are all about a linear, like a very clear career path, then you will automatically exclude other potential candidates that can be good because they have some cross-disciplinary skills, transdisciplinary skills. So in that sense, in both cases, both design world and HR world, in my opinion, like if you, let's say, when you curate the training data set for an algorithm, you are somehow informing the outcome and the output of that algorithm.
Of course,
being it as a selection of a candidate or a plaza design, whatever that is. In that sense, I believe it could be interesting to use the examples from architecture to visualize the potential clashes to the for the understanding of people that work in more strategic realms. Like I see the HR is more about making strategic decisions rather than physical objects. But the physical objects can be a very interesting way to visualize the potential impact of a design that was trained and informed from examples, source examples that were coming from the wrong context, for example.
So I completely get that you won't run out of viewers or listeners, because this is so fascinating to look at it, because in the physical world, things are much easier to be seen, which are like in a cultural and bias-driven world, is not to mention these very, very difficult to tackle things like disparate impact and so on and so on. That's very fascinating to see it as a visual metaphor for what is ahead of us. I very much like that approach. Yeah.
Yeah, and in general, I will say that yes, like there is a thing with the physical, like with the view, like we really perceive through our eyes in a way that has been it has been studied. It's much stronger, the impression we get from our view than the ones we get from other senses, even if they all concur to the impression we get of a situation, of a place, of a person, or whatever we are facing in that moment. And I will also say that regarding the visualizations, like these days, there are techniques to visualize data and to somehow reveal a little bit that biases, for example. So the idea of visualizing potential inputs and outputs and visualizing impacts and externalities could be very interesting, I believe, for people in the HR field to really somehow be more aware of the effects of their decisions.
So these are very interesting views on where the parallels and where the differences between the two approaches are. Could you highlight a bit more on the potential benefits we can have from sharing these views, and on the potential drawbacks when we go in, especially when we go into HR?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course. And thank you for this question. This is the key question that we have to address when we talk about AI. However, let me add something from, like, I just want to complete what we were discussing right before this, like about the idea of speaking openly about these biases, you know, like in our field, like we make, as I told you, we make objects that are there in the physical world for everyone to look at, make an opinion, discuss about that. So you're probably familiar with what happens when a new urban design project is dropped somewhere. You will have a participatory process. People will be requested to express an opinion before and after to see if they like what has been dropped into their community.
I'm very grateful that you mentioned that, because honestly, I have no clue how this works, but it's very interesting to see.
It happens like, or imagine every time there is a new condo built, and people have to agree on stuff, you know, the materials and, you know, for the public areas of the building, you know, where you, like within your house, you can do whatever you want, but outside in the public realm, then there are rules somehow of living together. And so, and the physical objects are there and everyone discuss about that. So in our field, it's really, there is no real shame about that. Actually, we engage in this kind of conversation openly with our clients and with the stakeholders. And it's a way to make the project better, actually, to have all these people involved. And that's also, that connects very well to what I'm going to say next about your question, because somehow, like, there is a level of complexity in doing things that is not always perfectly recorded by data. Somehow data are a synthesis, I will say, a curated synthesis in which someone decided which data to gather and how to build a data set. The sensors that have been using to gather this data might be, you know, designed in different ways to look more specifically to certain phenomena rather than others. So these are all curated decisions, like an art curator will decide which paintings are going into an exhibition. The same here, someone that curates a data set is deciding which data go into that data set. And that will directly link to our, potential and pitfalls of the AI conversation. So in the realm of HR specifically, as you asked, I will imagine that you decide which data to use, which can be behavioral data coming from social sciences like behavioral psychology, for example, all these kind of things, CVs, cover letters, sentiment analysis on covering letters, for example, could be a very interesting thing. And for sure, there is a potential there. So we all know how time consuming is to review all these things. So a tool that can do that automatically, it's going to save us a lot of time, really a lot, or to the HR managers we are referring about. In terms of doing the first screening, seeing trends and, seeing patterns. For example, seeing like once you output, like you drop out there a job post, for example, that is written in a certain way, which kind of people apply. So that's a result you can get through an automated analysis on the 500 applications you got, for example. However, on the side of the pitfalls, I want to stress how that curatorship phase of in which you decide which data to use, are you going to use only successful candidates from the previous 10 years from, the Western world, or are you going to expand to CVs from other areas of the world? I guess the results might be different. The outputs of the automated analysis might be different at the end. So somehow the pitfall could be the one of limiting the scope and narrowing the view to something that is already written in the data you choose to analyze. And it's somehow keeping out of the view some other situations, other people, in the case of HR, other candidates, or other types of behaviors that you might want to add to your team, because it might make it more different, more different in terms of different points of views, and that might lead to a better product at the very end. But
that's
the
a
moment
very interesting view from a theoretical, very interesting part from a theoretical point of view, because what I'm always wondering is, usually we know the features which kind of tell us what we'd like to have afterwards. We don't know them in advance. There are so many employees or co-workers which exhibit features, say, after 1 or 2 years of working together. And I wouldn't have been aware of all to look at these features when I would have to decide or look at the CV in the very beginning. That the problem is you don't know what to search for or what to look after.
Yeah, exactly. And that relates also to the fact that it's very hard to define in words what you want, what are your desires, what are your views. These kind of descriptions are very tough to put out. It will require a very articulated vocabulary that it's sometimes, since it relates to gut feelings, and impressions, like the impression the human HR manager might get of a candidate after an interview, it's completely different from the impression that could get from the raw CV, the standardized CV. So it's very hard to know in advance, as you say. That's very well said, what you want. And that's another moment in which the design process can come into help, because designers also don't know what they want at the beginning. Clients don't know what they want. Or they have a very rough idea, let's say, very abstract. And it's through the iterative process in which you test the different options that you get to a, let's say, good enough solution at the end. Something that is good for the client, good for the stakeholders, good for you as a designer. It aligns with your own view of the profession, and for the people that are going to inhabit it and use it on a daily basis. And that's an iterative process. It requires a lot of going back and forward, redesigning, challenging assumptions. So something I believe there was interesting at the beginning, after looking at the problem from a different angle, might not look anymore so cool. So let's rework that. Let's go back to the square one and see what if we test a different option. And these things are really out of a critical, let's say, it's a creative process, I will say. That's how it's referred in literature. And I believe that every profession has some part of that. So if you are making a new team for a new project in a company, you might not know which people will work better for that. So maybe a little bit of testing could be good, like trying different profiles and see who performs the better after 1 year or after 6 months. So instead of making an assumption before and apply it in a very, let's say, straightforward way, leave it open for a reconsideration. And somehow, and the moment in which you imagine this iterative process, AI becomes a tool. So it's not anymore something that will step into your feet and say, oh, I'm gonna, evaluate these candidates for you, or I'm gonna make the decision for you, whatever. But something is like, okay, so I have this tool that can help me in screening a bigger number of candidates, for example. Can I program it in a way that is not only giving a single type of output, but is maybe also looking for contrasts? And saying, I want also people that did not have that specific experience, which I believe is important, because I want to see how these people will work in this specific new project I'm hiring for.
That's
so
fascinating.
In that sense, it could be a very powerful tool. It's literally like a tool in our hands rather than a substitute or a automated HR, or all these definitions are a little bit misleading, I believe. Like AI, it's a tool. Like in design, we have been using digital tools for the past 30 to 40 years, more and more sophisticated every year. We had to keep up with learning new functions, etc. But still, there is someone leading the process behind. And with the AI, at least the current state AI, the one we have available these days, which is not conscious, so it's not really having the same kind of intuitions we do have. We could, let's say, instead of phrasing it as the automated designer or the automated HR manager or whatever, automated whatever accountant or I don't know what, we can phrase it as the AI is a new tool, quite powerful one we have in our hands to expand our view and to test different point of views by testing different data sets. So if we exercise our, let's say, our ability to make choices in curating the data sets, we can see which outcomes come from that automated analysis, and testing different data sets can bring to different outputs. And then it's up to us again to decide what is, interesting, could be that maybe I didn't thought about that. So, oh, look, that can be, I would have never hired a person with such a background, but look how he's performing. Wow, what a surprise. So maybe I should look more into that, these kind of things. I believe it's a tool that can really open up to the unexpected if used in the correct way.
This is also a very, very fascinating part, because we were mentioning, or we were touching issues like biases and cultural things very, very often. And I think the problem about those is that you're not completely aware of your own cultural biases or biases in general when you take decisions. Do you have a recommendation for our viewers how to how to develop a practice that we can become better at this when we're dealing with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Christian.
Sorry about
because
this, but
no worries. Like, because I believe it's very personal. Like, what I try to do as much as I can personally is to try to step into someone else's feet at first. So to look at the situation from a different point of view. And that is something we can visualize again with a landscape metaphor. So if you imagine to be in a place like you are walking in a countryside, or you look at that countryside from the top of a mountain that is nearby, you will get a completely different angle and a different view, and you will have a, potentially different impression of what that place is. So here is the same, like, landscape exists because of the view on the land, the Landschaft in German. So the same is here. Like, if you change your point of view, you will change the perception you have of a place, of a person, of a situation. So that's an exercise that I believe could be useful. The other thing I would like to stress is to consider that AI is the result of someone's design. So AI was not born out of nowhere. Someone designed it. Some computer scientists, and these are always teams that are very transdisciplinary. There are a lot of mathematicians, psychologists, etc. It's huge. Yeah. But as every design, everything we do is biased herself. So there is no unbiased design in this world, and AI makes no difference to that. So somehow you need to acknowledge that a tool, whatever object, works very well for performing the actions it was designed for. So the moment in which you recognize which are the actions that an object was designed for, you will know how to use it at its best. Imagine a hammer. You can very easily, use it on on some piece of wood if you want to put a screw into it, whatever. So you're not going to use it if you want to clean some glass. You're not going to use a hammer. So yeah, it's funny, but that's exactly
I could do so sometimes, but yeah.
So it's somehow AI is the output of a design, so it's not biased. And actually, if you want to get to know more about how designers work in the computer science field, there is a very interesting course I'd like to recommend to your audience. Okay. Is it a free one, or do we have to pay for it? Absolutely free. It's just 8 sessions of 1 hour each, more or less. Wow. And you can even get a certificate for your LinkedIn page. At the end. I'm taking it. Yeah, I'm almost done, like a couple of more sessions to go. But the course is called The Foundations, and is issued by the Center for Humane Technology, which is the center that was founded by Tristan Harris, who's a former ethicist at Google, who then moved on and started working on revealing the cultural biases and the design, let's say, specificities of social media and how they affect people and how they interact with people. So it's specific to the social media world. So, but if you are someone that comes from a non-designer, from a not from a design background, let's say, it will be very interesting to get a deep but also quick view on how different values can shape different products. That's absolutely fascinating. Would you mind if you share the link for our viewers? Of course, I will share you the link afterwards. Yeah, definitely. And I highly recommend to take it. You will look at at social media at first, but then to every other object in your life from a different point of view and with a different eyes, I will say, after taking
Sounds a bit like an awareness training, Yeah,
it's an awareness training designed specifically for social media designers. and programmers, but then by extensions for every designer in every field and everyone who is interested in knowing more about that. So somehow, whenever you use AI, pay attention that AI is good at doing something like analyzing data, for instance. It might not be so good at doing other things, like reflecting in action. You know, reflecting.
Okay, it's like with the hammer, you know, like the cleaning glass.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I will say this is to find another parallel between what I do and the HR world. You know, there is a book that another recommendation I make for your audience, The Reflective Practitioner by Donald Schoen. Donald Schoen was a professor of urban planning at MIT. And he wrote this book in which he discussed about the reflecting in action process, which is basically at the basis of the design process, but also at the basis of every activity that entails a feedback loop with a human being in let's say as a you know, methodology, I will call it, maybe like unstructured methodology that happens every time you are doing something in a feedback loop with other human beings. And the funny thing is that he uses two examples to make it clear. One is the one of the architect, and the other one is the one of the psychologist. So somehow, yeah, I will say that if someone is still wondering why we can find a parallel between these two apparently very far away professions, that's another interesting thing to look at.
So I would like to put an emphasis on the how do we actually keep the impact of artificial intelligence in check once again. So is there an organizational unit or a practice you think is in charge of, say, keeping track of artificial intelligence as a tool and not be surpassed by it?
Another good question, Christian. So I don't believe there is a specific institution or unit that is working on that. Albeit there are a lot of associations that are, you know, working on the ethics of AI, etc. Both, I know some of them in Europe, in the United States, but I'm sure there are some of them worldwide. However, you know, in simpler terms, I will say, I might recommend another small exercise, a small practice that each one of us could do. You know, the practice of looking from outside at what we do and try to phrase it not only regarding the mechanical actions, you know, like I do this, you know, I file that, I fill that file, that chart, whatever. No, more about all the soft skills that are involved. So, for example, I trusted my intuition, my gut feeling into doing that, and there is some, you know, this decision. It's also a matter of how I like the candidate rather than purely a rational evaluation of its background, for example.
So you once again advocate for awareness in a holistic way, as far as
exactly, and in a proactive
saying, right?
way, I will say. So we should be aware of that, and we should also, I think, engage in conversations with our peers about that. So what is to be an HR manager? What is to be a designer? These questions might appear very banal, but I believe they are key these days, and they need to be addressed. And of course, there is no one single answer to that. We can discuss for the next 3 days about that, you know? But the mere fact of, the simple fact, I will say, of just thinking about that, it's already setting up an environment in which we look critically at what we do, and we look critically at what our tools can do for us. And in that sense, I think it could be an interesting activity to engage with, to make sure we keep an awareness on what, as human, we can do in wherever field we operate in.
And do you have experience in what format you actually share the insights when each of us does this exercise? You know, I might come to different conclusions than you might when you do the exercise, and HR people very much like this. We share the views, we share we share our results or our benefits?
That's again, it's at the moment is unstructured, so it has to be designed and defined. So it's up to you to really find a way that is most suit your own approach to let's say to make this output. I will say probably just the fact of having a conversation and trying to write it down afterward, so somehow to keep a recording can be good and can be interesting to go back and read back what was written and or said during that conversation can be a good beginning. And then we can come up with lists of keywords, and
Perhaps
elements
as an idea for our viewers, it would be very nice to see how that worked for you. So if you can send us feedback to livestream@illegal.de, how this worked out when you actually tried this practice Paola just recommended, that would be awesome.
like
to share it.
I tried it, like that's basically the last page of my PhD is exactly about that. So it's really trying to give a new definition, let's say, an incomplete and definitely in progress definition of landscape design, which is the field the specific field in which I'm testing AI in my PhD. And to engage in a conversation with the other faculty members about that. So my final, let's say, conclusion, let's say, of my PhD is that we should discuss a little bit more in depth about that. Because if we want to find a role for AI and understand what AI can do for us, we need to be, first of all, more aware of what we do in first place. So, and that is an ongoing conversation. I believe it's not something we can, complete in the session of a one meeting or whatever, because it's a super complex and subjective also matter. But to begin to build a common knowledge about that can be very interesting, and really engaging in a conversation with peers, with colleagues also, and especially with people that think in a different way from you. Maybe it can be interesting to test this argument with someone who's a very, very, let's say, supporter of artificial intelligence and see where the conversation leads us. I understand that it's not delivering a kind of tool that can be immediately actioned in a company or to make strategic decisions, but still it's
have to start
lead
from
there.
somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. We need to start from somewhere, and I can tell you the debate is in very, very early stages. Since I mean, in academia the debate was going on since a few years, I have to say. But on the mainstream media, for example, it really emerged after ChatGPT was made public about a year ago. So we are still figuring out what to do with that and in the future on how AI will affect labor, for example, is still to be written, in my opinion. And part of that will depend on the ability professionals will have to make sure they are aware and make the others aware of what they do in a complex way, rather than focusing only on the mere tasks.
I could go on for hours like that, and it's so fascinating, the insights you kind of give us. But we have to come to an end at some point. So I have to make you publicly promise something to me, which is I would love you to recommend another person to talk to like this in the live stream, because we also got in touch by personal recommendation of our former candidate Klaus, and it seems to work out pretty well. So thank you very much. It was so fascinating talking to you. How can our viewers get in touch with you if they have additional questions?
Well, I will point them to my LinkedIn profile. Okay. I will share the link for the podcast description. So I check it daily. So if you message me there, we can then move the conversation to an email conversation or set up a call. I'm totally up to that. Yeah, for another person, I will say someone that is engaging in how to say, uncommon way to see the problem of HR. So someone that, for example, trains candidates to, in a way, to how to express in a more clear way possible their skills that are not discipline specific, but are more lateral, I will say,
Okay.
and related to be a human and the human capabilities and what people can do that is not necessarily written in, like, directly in the experiences that they have, but what are these skills? Or another option might be someone that is really into social processes and designing events, I will say, or supporting companies into embedding these more, let's say, I will say, will train companies into biases recognition and teaching them how to operate with that.
It would be
So
fascinating to meet these or to get in touch with these people in that order, not to appear too greedy, but that's just great.
yeah.
So thank you very much for your time and your wise insight. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for all your time and your insights. Have a nice afternoon.
And thank you very much, Christian, for having me. It was a pleasure to participate to this podcast.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, thank you very much for your time and your attention. Because everything in this live stream is about you, the viewers, I would like you very much to address follow-up questions, comments, concerns to livestream@eligo.de. And please also consider signing up at www.eligo.de/livestream to allow us to keep you updated in a proactive way. Our next stream is scheduled to take place on Friday, 5th of January 2024. And if you like our stream, please consider sharing it and bring friends to the next stream. Thank you so much. My name is Christian Montel. It was an honor having you.